when your mind can't stop worrying, find deep peace. Right now, there is a dizzying, suspended vibration spinning directly behind your eyes, a restless state of mental animation where your thoughts are desperately trying to live in 5 different versions of tomorrow all at once. Your palms might feel slightly cool, and your pulse carries a subtle, racing flutter because your mind is frantically sketching, erasing, and redrawing invisible maps in the dark air of your room. You are caught at an agonizing crossroad in your life, paralyzed by the terrifying weight of making the wrong choice, terrified that one single step in the dark will ruin your potential or lead you into a landscape of permanent regret. The room around you has grown profoundly quiet, and the midnight air carries the faint, crisp scent of autumn leaves, damp with night dew outside your window pane. The heavy cotton quilt over your feet feels solid and protective, yet beneath the surface of your skin, your thoughts keep walking down phantom roads, analyzing every hypothetical branch until your body feels completely frozen. Perhaps you came to this quiet space tonight because your mind is utterly exhausted from running endless future simulations, trying to calculate the exact path that will shield you from pain, failure, or loneliness. It is a profoundly lonely kind of fatigue, lying awake under the pressure of an unmade decision, watching your mental energy burn away while the clock steadily ticks forward. You might feel a deep frustration with your own hesitation, treating your inability to choose as a character flaw or a sign of weakness. But what you are experiencing right now, dear friend, is not a failure of your intelligence, and you are not broken. The paralysis you feel is simply a natural human reaction to an impossible task. You are trying to use your mind to build a flawless stone castle out of shifting fog, and the resulting exhaustion is your body's way of asking you to step off the wheel. Tonight, we will not force your mind to become completely silent, nor will we demand that you magically discover the absolute answer to your problems. We are simply going to learn how to stand comfortably right in the center of the question. There is a surprising, liberating insight within ancient Buddhist wisdom that addresses this spinning state of indecision. The mind does not freeze because you lack clarity, or because you are missing a crucial piece of information. It freezes because you are clinging to the illusion that there is a pre-written, perfect blueprint for your life from which you can dangerously fall. We treat our major life choices like a high-stakes tightrope walk over a canyon, believing that if we choose path A, we will find complete enlightenment, and if we choose path B, we will plunge into total ruin. But this fear of making a mistake is actually your ego disguised as protective wisdom, trying to manipulate an unformed future so it never has to face the reality of uncertainty. The profound paradox of choice is that peace never comes from selecting the perfect destination. Peace arrives when you realize that every single path belongs to the very same supportive earth, and that the quality of your life is determined by the awareness you bring to your immediate step, not by the destination you are trying to guess in the dark. If it feels right, take a slow, unhurried breath in through your nose, letting the cool air fill the back of your throat, and let it go with a long, soft sigh that carries no immediate destination. You do not need to force anything in this moment. Nothing is required of you now. The active world has turned off its lights. The deadlines have retreated into the shadows, and you are safe enough to soften the rigid analytical guard you have been keeping behind your eyes all day long. Think of your current mental state as a traveler standing at a high mountain junction during a sudden autumn storm. In your mind, you are searching for a clear guide, a solid arrow to tell you where to go. But when you look at the junction, you find that the old wooden signposts have completely rotted away from years of exposure to the cold wind and damp mist, leaving their painted text to dissolve into the wet dirt beneath your feet. Maybe you have felt this too, during the frantic hours of your working day, a sudden rush of panic that forces you to mentally list every pro and con over and over, until the words lose their meaning entirely. We look at the rotted signpost of our future, and we feel a deep sense of vulnerability, believing that if we cannot see through the fog, we are completely lost. But notice how, even while your thoughts are running miles ahead into an imaginary autumn woods, your physical frame remains safely here, breathing in the dark. The terrifying futures your mind is constructing do not exist anywhere in the room. They are merely thin, fragile spiderwebs spun out of your own protective anxiety. You do not have to solve your whole life tonight. The ground beneath your bed is not shifting, and it does not require you to have a master map before it agrees to support your weight. In a moment, we will explore an ancient story about a traveler who found himself stranded at just such a rotted junction, and how a very simple, heavy object helped him discover a different way to stand in the mist. But before we journey there, let yourself simply exist within the unformed space of this late evening. You do not need to clean your thoughts or force the confusion to clear right this second. Even the act of noticing that your pulse is fast and your mind is branching is a beautiful form of gentle mindfulness. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, let your stomach soften completely into the bed, and let the small muscles around your eyes uncoil. You have spent so much energy trying to see through the fog of next year. Tonight, you can let the signposts rest in the mud. The mountain does not demand that you walk its paths tonight. It simply invites you to rest your weight upon its solid ridge, letting the night move forward without you needing to steer it. The wind moving through the high, rocky pass of the northern crags had a sharp, biting edge that smelled of frozen pine needles and wet granite. It was a place where the weather changed within the span of 3 breaths, dropping a thick, gray curtain of mountain fog over the ridges until a traveler could barely see the tips of their own fingers. A young man named Tessan had been walking along the upper trail since early morning, his mind churning with a heavy, restless conflict that made his temples throb with exhaustion. He had reached a major turning point in his life back in the trading valleys, a choice between taking over his family's established pottery kiln or abandoning everything to study medicine in the crowded ports of the South. For weeks, he had done nothing but weigh the risks, mapping out endless paths of failure and regret for both choices until his thoughts felt like a swarm of angry hornets trapped inside his skull. By the time the afternoon mist rolled in, erasing the horizon, Tessin found himself standing at a wide 3-way junction where the trail split into the unknown. He stepped forward to read the ancient wooden signpost that had guided travelers through the pass for decades, but his heart sank into his belly. The damp mountain air and winter rot had finally done their work. The central wooden post had snapped at the base, and its carved, painted arms lay face down in the black mud, half-eaten by beetles and covered in dark moss. The text was entirely gone, dissolved into the earth. Tessin stood completely frozen in the middle of the trail, the cold fog clinging to his eyelashes, a sudden wave of panic tightening his throat. To turn left might mean a life of dull regret. To turn right might mean isolation and poverty. To stand still meant freezing in the dark. A low, wet snapping sound broke the heavy silence of the ridge. Out of the gray wall of mist emerged an old hermit named Master Bankei, wearing a rough cloak of woven reeds that rustled softly with every movement. Bankei was carrying a shallow wicker basket filled with small, wild chestnuts he had gathered from the lower slopes. He did not seem surprised to find a stranded traveler staring blankly at a pile of rotted wood. He simply walked over to a flat patch of earth beneath a wind-stunted pine tree, knelt down with a slow, creaking stiffness in his knees, and began to arrange a few dry twigs to start a tiny smoky fire. Tessin watched the old man, his own breath coming in short, anxious puffs of white vapor. He could not contain the frantic pressure inside his chest. He rushed toward the hermit, pointing down at the broken wood in the mud, his voice cracking as he asked how anyone was supposed to find the right path when the signs had been destroyed by the mountain. He explained his entire dilemma, listing every argument, every potential disaster, and every hidden trap he had calculated for both of his futures, demanding to know which direction would lead him away from regret. Bankei did not answer. He blew softly onto the small spark in his twigs, his weathered face calm and unhurried as the blue smoke drifted up into the heavy fog. When the fire began to crackle, the old man reached out and patted a large, moss-covered stone boundary marker that sat right at the center of the 3-way junction. This marker was a heavy piece of ancient gray granite, buried deep within the mountain's spine, overgrown with rough, pale green lichen that had taken a century to grow. It had no arrows carved into its surface, it held no names of distant towns, and it did not lean toward any of the 3 trails. It simply rested there, solid and unmoving, letting the cold mist wash over its stone face. The old hermit picked up a single wild chestnut from his basket and placed it on a flat section of the granite marker to roast. He looked up at Tessin, his small eyes holding the deep, quiet weight of the ridge itself. He asked the young man if the stone was currently lost because it could not see the bottom of the mountain. Tessin blinked, his mind momentarily jammed by the simplicity of the question. He replied that the stone could not be lost because it wasn't trying to go anywhere. It was rooted right into the center of the pass. Banke nodded slowly, the dry reeds of his cloak rustling as he leaned back against the pine tree. He told Tessin that the broken signposts were never the things that kept a traveler safe. They were just thin pieces of wood that told people what to hope for or what to fear. When a man relies entirely on the painted lines of a signpost, his mind is never on the path. His feet are actually touching. His mind is living inside an imaginary valley that he has not yet reached. The mountain has 3 paths, but every single one of them is made of the very same granite and wet dirt. The stone at the center does not worry about which path is better, because it knows that no matter where the trail leads, it cannot fall off the earth. Tessin stood completely motionless as the old man's words settled through the chaotic layers of his overthinking. He looked away from the rotted wood in the mud and focused entirely on the heavy, silent presence of the lichen-covered boundary marker. A profound wave of emotional recognition washed over his tired frame, making his shoulders drop with a sudden heavy relief. He realized that for all these weeks, he had been treating his choice like a life-or-death sentence, believing that his fundamental safety depended on his ability to predict the future through sheer mental strain. But looking at the unmoving stone, he saw that he had been completely ignoring the solid reality of the ground beneath his own sandals. The old master took a small wooden stick and gently rolled the roasted chestnut off the stone marker, handing it to the shivering traveler. The outer shell was black and charred, but it felt intensely warm against Tessin's frozen palms, its nutty, rich aroma cutting through the damp smell of the pine smoke. Banke did not tell him which trail to take when the morning came, nor did he offer a magic formula to dissolve the uncertainty of tomorrow. He simply closed his eyes and let his breathing slow down, matching the steady, silent rhythm of the mountain ridge. In a moment, this high pass will show us how Tessin handled the rest of his journey through the fog. But for now, let that image of the unmoving stone sit quietly in the back of your own awareness. Notice how the young traveler did not need the mist to miraculously clear in order to find his footing. He simply had to stop demanding that a piece of rotted wood guarantee his safety. The cold wind is continuing to blow across the upper crags, but inside the circle of the small fire, everything is perfectly still. As you lie here in your own bed, let your frame mimic the heavy, buried depth of that ancient granite marker. You do not need to choose your entire future in this single hour, and you do not need to rebuild the broken signs of your life before you are allowed to rest. Let the weight of your thoughts drop down from your head and sink into the solid, unshifting surface beneath you, allowing the night to settle around your body without needing to know where the path will turn when the sun returns. This story of the broken signpost on the misty ridge is not telling us to stop caring about our lives or to abandon the meaningful choices we must make as we grow. It is not asking us to become cold, unfeeling statues or to live with a passive indifference to where our path takes us. It is showing us something much quieter, a deeper way to meet our daily choices, without letting the weight of anticipation shatter our current mental sanity. When we are paralyzed by a major crossroad, our genuine suffering is rarely caused by the options themselves, or even by the inherent uncertainty of tomorrow. The true exhaustion comes from the specific way the mind holds the concept of choice, turning an ordinary step on the earth into a terrifying trial where our entire worth hangs in the balance. We create an invisible pressure that demands a perfect guarantee from an unformed future, and then we wonder why our heads spin when we look at the paths ahead. One of the oldest insights of Buddhist wisdom reminds us that the primary wound we experience is simply the reality of change and the presence of things we cannot immediately see or control. It is the natural presence of the mountain fog, the reality that a career might shift, a relationship might alter, or a geographical move might bring unforeseen challenges. This first wound is a natural condition of living a fully human life. But the second wound is the one we inflict upon ourselves through our endless, frantic overthinking. It is the internal narrative that insists a single wrong turn will permanently ruin our capacity for happiness. The habit of projecting our deepest insecurities into an imaginary decade, and the intense resistance to the simple reality that we cannot know everything before we begin. Wisdom helps us stop adding this secondary injury to our hearts, allowing us to step back from the edge of the analytical cliff. When we translate these ancient principles into the language of our modern emotional world, what we often call attachment is simply a tight, anxious constriction that says, "I must see the end of the road before I can be permitted to breathe." It is a desperate craving for safety through mental control, an assumption that if we can only analyze every path long enough, we can somehow trick the universe into keeping us completely safe from sorrow. We treat our choices like a series of dangerous traps rather than what they truly are, simple, neutral experiments in living. But mindfulness, when approached with true gentleness, is nothing more than the capacity to look at the spinning maps inside your head without being swept away by their frantic choreography. It is the simple ability to feel the cool, rapid vibration behind your eyes, to recognize the tight knot in your chest, and to say to yourself, "There is a deep fear of the dark trying to run my mind right now, but I do not have to obey its urgency." This shifting of your awareness brings a soft, spacious perspective to the law of impermanence. We frequently view the fluid, changing nature of our lives as an enemy that threatens to destabilize our security, leaving us vulnerable to failure or loss. But impermanence also means that no single choice you make can ever lock you into a permanent prison of misery. The path you select is not a rigid stone tunnel that seals shut behind you. It is a living, shifting track that will continue to offer fresh crossings, new light, and unexpected turns every single day. The separate, static self that your mind is trying so hard to protect from making a mistake does not actually exist. You are a fluid stream of awareness. And just as a river cannot truly take a wrong turn because every valley belongs to the same sea, your life cannot fall off the fundamental ground of reality. By opening your heart to this understanding, a quiet sense of compassion begins to take the place of your old self-judgment. Compassion is not a rigid moral chore. It is the willingness to look at your own paralyzed hesitation and realize that you have only been trying to protect yourself from pain. You have been freezing at the crossroads because you care so deeply about doing things right, not because you are weak or indecisive. But as the old hermit showed Tessan with the lichen-covered stone, the ultimate sanctuary was never the painted arrow. On the signpost it was the unshifting mountain spine that held the traveler up, even when the fog was thickest. Your capacity for peace does not live in the future. You are trying to guess it lives in the silent, unmoving space that is currently witnessing your confusion. Slowly, the ancient teaching moves closer to the immediate boundary of your mattress, blending with the steady rise and fall of your abdomen in the dark. You do not need to build a flawless map for next year before your body is allowed to rest tonight. The world outside your window is entirely satisfied to remain unformed and dark, letting the dew settle on the grass without asking permission from anyone. Allow yourself to drop the heavy burden of predicting your destiny, recognizing that the very uncertainty you have been fighting is actually a spacious field of complete freedom, waiting for you to stop steering and simply trust the ground beneath your frame. If it feels right, let your attention drift gently away from the complicated branches of your mental map and settle down into the heavy physical reality of your body resting here in the quiet. There is absolutely no need to adjust your posture with any sense of rigid determination. Perhaps simply notice the point of contact between the back of your head and the surface beneath it, letting your neck muscles slacken a tiny bit at a time. You might take a slow, deep breath in through your nose, tracking the cool sensation as it crosses your lips, and let it pass out through your mouth like a soft, unhurried winter wind. There is no requirement for you to change anything about this moment. Even the simple act of noticing how tightly you have been holding your breath is an act of perfect, gentle awareness. You do not need to clear the fog through sheer force of will. You only need to sit quietly at the center of your own unformed evening. As you continue to breathe softly, let your awareness travel to the small muscles right behind your eyes, where the frantic energy of calculation has been humming all day long. You might imagine those tiny, overactive fibers letting go, allowing your gaze to soften into the dark, velvety space behind your eyelids. Now, let your attention drop all the way down into your hips, your thighs, and the soles of your feet, where the capacity for grounding lives. Do not try to minimize the intense restlessness that may still be vibrating inside your chest. Instead, simply name the emotional pattern that has been driving this current of anxiety. Perhaps it is the habit of demanding a flawless guarantee before you permit yourself to live. Perhaps it is the old, tired pattern of treating every unchosen path as an executioner's blade. Just label it gently in your thoughts, recognizing it as a deeply protective mechanism that has only been trying to preserve your safety by keeping your feet from ever moving. Imagine, if you will, the wide, misty three-way junction from the old story sitting quietly right within the space of your own awareness. See the rotted pieces of the wooden signposts lying face down in the wet mud, their painted arrows fading into the soil. Instead of using your mind to desperately reassemble those broken pieces, or guess what text used to be carved upon them, you might simply visualize that ancient, heavy granite boundary marker resting right at the center of your chest. Feel the solid, unshifting weight of that stone, buried deep within the core of your being, overgrown with pale green lichen that knows exactly how to thrive in the cold fog. Watch what happens in your imagination as you place your current, spinning dilemma directly onto the flat surface of that stone. You do not need to force a sudden revelation. Even letting the worry sit there without trying to solve it is enough. Let the mental image change slightly now, allowing the specific choices, the financial worries, or the relationship questions to lose their sharp geometric lines. They are not being erased or ignored. They are simply being allowed to rest upon a foundation that is much larger than the analytical mind. If your thoughts try to pull you back into the details of the crisis, or if your pulse quickens with the old urge to map out next year, that is entirely okay. You can return to the heavy sensation of your quilt and the steady rise and fall of your abdomen whenever you are ready. There is no failure if your focus wanders the mountain spine, knows exactly how to support a restless traveler, and it does not require you to be perfectly still before it agrees to hold your weight. What happened next as Tessin climbed higher into the crags will show us an even deeper way to integrate this unmoving piece into your daily life. But right now, let yourself remain in this intermediate space where the work of calculation has been suspended. The night air in your room remains steady, cool, and non-judgmental, and the heavy structure of your analytical guard is safe enough to unbuckle, one small strap at a time. You do not have to achieve complete clarity before your eyes close for the evening. The goal of this hour is not to force yourself to feel perfectly fixed or miraculously decided. The goal is simply to help you feel less alone inside the vast, unmapped landscape of your own life. Let your next exhalation be as wide and hollow as the mountain pass, holding nothing but the simple, unhurried movement of the night as it passes over the ridge. The mist grew thicker as Tessin climbed higher into the jagged peak above the mountain pass, turning the sky a heavy, seamless white that dissolved the shapes of the ancient cliffs. His internal conflict had not disappeared. It had only grown more urgent as the day began to fade. The wild chestnut from Bankus fire had warmed his fingers, but his mind had quickly returned to its old, frantic spinning, replaying the terror of making a choice that might lead to a lifetime of regret. He was climbing toward a remote settlement where an old blind weaver lived in a stone hut near the upper crags, a woman renowned for spinning rough hemp cord used by the valley farmers. Tessin hoped that someone who had spent a lifetime in darkness might understand the particular agony of a man who could not see the road ahead. When he reached the small stone dwelling, the air inside smelled of dried grasses, raw hemp fibers, and the faint, sweet scent of burning peat. The room was dim, illuminated only by a tiny oil lamp that cast long, flickering shadows across the walls. The old woman sat on a low wooden bench, her sightless eyes calm and fixed on the space before her, while her gnarled fingers worked with an astonishing fluid speed. She was spinning a rough hemp cord, using a simple, uncarved wooden walking staff with a blunt iron tip as an anchor for her raw fibers. The room was filled with the rhythmic, scraping sound of her wooden spindle clicking against the stone floor, a steady beat that seemed to measure the passage of the cold mountain evening. Tessin sat down on a pile of raw straw near her loom, his breath still ragged from the long climb. The pressure behind his eyes was immense, a sharp, cold dizziness that made him speak without waiting for a greeting. He poured out his entire dilemma once more, describing the terrifying responsibility of choosing his future path, his voice rising as he admitted that the fear of making the wrong decision was making him completely sick. He asked her how she could bear to spin a cord when she could not see the clothes it would weave or the fields where it would be used, demanding to know how she avoided the terror of a mistaken stroke. The old woman's fingers did not miss a single beat. She allowed the spindle to drop and spin, its wooden edge clicking softly against the granite flagging, before she reached out and laid her hand on the plain wooden walking staff beside her knee. She did not offer Tessin a sweeping philosophical lecture or a grand promise of success. Instead, she lifted the iron-tipped staff and placed it directly into the young man's hands. She told him that when she walks the steep paths above the crags in the dark, she does not try to project her mind a mile down the mountain to see if there is a landslide or a hidden cliff. She explained that the staff does not need to see the whole peak. To find a safe way home, it only needs to touch the single, narrow inch of earth directly beneath its iron tip. She leaned forward, her voice a low, gravelly whisper that cut through the sound of the wind rattling the wooden thatch. She told Tessin that his suffering was not born from a lack of a map, but from his habit of treating every hypothetical danger in his head as an absolute truth that he had to defeat before he took his next step. He was trying to walk 10 miles in his thoughts, while his feet were stuck on a single piece of straw. Tessin held the rough, uncarved wood of the walking staff, feeling the coldness of the blunt iron tip pressing into the palm of his hand. A subtle, quiet realization began to dawn within him, not as a sudden burst of magical perfection, but as a physical shift in how his body related to its own confusion. He looked down at the iron tip, realizing that for months he had been trying to live his entire adulthood before the sun had even risen on tomorrow. He had been allowing his mind to spin 5 different futures all at once, treating each imaginary failure as a real emergency that demanded an immediate solution. He took a slow, deep breath, letting the dry, dusty smell of the hemp fill his lungs, and for the first time, he did not try to argue with the uncertainty. He did not force himself to make a final choice between the pottery kiln and the medical ports in that very second. Nor did he pretend that his anxiety had miraculously vanished. Instead, he chose one small act of immediate discipline. He stopped treating his racing thoughts as absolute commands. He allowed the doubt to exist as a simple, uncomfortable presence in his chest, sitting quietly with the reality that he did not know what next year would look like. He reached into his pack and quietly began to help the old woman untangle a twisted knot of raw hemp fibers, focusing entirely on the texture of the rough cord beneath his thumbs. Now, let this subtle transformation in Tessin's heart move closer to your own quiet space tonight. The stone hut and the old weaver are fading into the background, leaving only the sensory rhythm of that clicking spindle to blend with the stillness of your own room. You can see that finding peace at a major crossroad does not require you to become a person who never feels the chill of doubt or the fear of a mistake. It simply means that when your thoughts begin to branch into 100 terrifying futures tonight, you can choose to breathe before you follow them down the old, familiar paths of paralysis. You can let the unmade decision sit quietly on the floor beside you without treating its presence as an executioner's blade. Let the heat of your analytical mind cool down completely and allow your frame to sink softly into the unmapped depth of the bed beneath you, trusting the single inch of reality you are currently touching. When we look deeply into the spinning dizziness that keeps your mind awake tonight, we can begin to see that the paralysis of indecision is not a failure of your logic, but an expression of a deeply ingrained psychological survival mechanism. The mind detests a void it treats an unmapped tomorrow as an immediate threat to its survival. To cope with the raw vulnerability of not knowing what lies ahead, The ego attempts to exert absolute control over the future by running endless, frantic mental simulations. We lie perfectly still in the dark, constructing elaborate mental paths, trying to project our awareness 10 years into an unformed valley, believing that if we can only anticipate every single obstacle, we can somehow bypass the natural presence of pain. We turn our choices into an agonizing trial where we play the role of the judge, the jury, and the accused all at once, using harsh self-judgment and shame as analytical tools to force ourselves into a state of certainty. We tell ourselves that our hesitation is a proof of inadequacy, and we slowly transform a temporary life transition into a rigid, painful identity, defining ourselves as a fundamentally stuck person who is incapable of finding the right road. This internal theater is exactly how the mind amplifies a simple, neutral moment of choice into a state of profound psychological suffering. Ancient Buddhist wisdom sheds a clear, compassionate light on this exhausting loop by drawing a sharp distinction between the primary challenges that life brings and the secondary suffering that our thoughts construct on top of them. The first pain is simply the reality of the crossroads itself. It is the natural condition of the high mountain ridge, the presence of the heavy autumn fog, the rotted wood of the old signpost melting into the mud, and the plain fact that as human beings, we are designed to walk with limited vision. This first pain is clean, unavoidable, and carries no malice. It is simply the natural landscape of change. The second pain, however, is the infinite web of phantom futures we spin behind our eyes out of our own resistance. It is the terror of future regret that we manufacture, the habit of treating every unchosen path as a permanent loss of happiness, and the exhausting demand that the universe grant us an absolute guarantee of safety before we agree to move our feet. We cannot always dissolve the mountain mist through sheer willpower, and we cannot force life to give us a detailed map of next year before the sun has even risen on tomorrow. But we can absolutely choose to stop feeding the secondary fire of our own calculation. We can notice the frantic branching of our thoughts and realize that these complex, terrifying maps are not real pathways. They are merely thin spiderwebs spun by our own protective anxiety. Peace within this ancient lineage of insight is never defined as the total absence of difficulty, nor is it the magical disappearance of the choice you have to make. Peace is an entirely different relationship with that difficulty. It is the willingness to stand right at the broken junction, feeling the cool moisture of the fog against your skin, and recognizing that your safety does not depend on your ability to see the bottom of the peak. Your safety is found in the unshifting strength of the ridge beneath your frame, which holds you up regardless of which direction your sandals are pointing. When you bring this simple clarity to the tightness behind your eyes, the nature of your confusion begins to change form. You see that you do not need to fix your life or cure your hesitation before you are allowed to rest your weary mind tonight. The habit of using shame to force an answer only packs the mental dirt more tightly, freezing your feet in place. By understanding that there is no hidden, pre-written blueprint from which you can fall, the terrible stakes of your decision begin to drop away. You are not a traveler walking a treacherous high wire, where one single slip means absolute ruin. You are a human being walking upon a vast, supportive earth where every single trail is made of the very same granite and soil, and where every turn offers fresh light, new crossings, and unexpected opportunities to learn. The choice you are facing is not an executioner's blade. It is simply a next step, and like the old woman's iron-tipped staff, you only need enough clarity to touch the single inch of ground directly beneath your weight. Slowly, this integration allows the frantic machinery of your overthinking to wind down into a soft, spacious silence. The phantom futures that were keeping your pulse fast lose their geometric sharpness, drifting away like wisps of blue pine smoke into the dark evening sky. You do not have to carry the heavy responsibility of your entire adulthood into your dreams tonight. The realization that you are the wide, open awareness witnessing the confusion rather than the separate, broken self trapped inside it brings a profound physical relief to your tired frame. Let your shoulders uncoil completely, letting the back of your neck stretch out as you give up the daily effort of steering your destiny. You are safe enough right now to let the maps rest on the floor. The mountain does not require you to have an answer before it agrees to hold you, and the dark night is entirely satisfied to envelop your body in a quiet, unmapped sanctuary, where there is nothing left to calculate and nothing left to fear. This grounding clarity from the windswept pass and the dim stone hut is not meant to remain confined to an ancient trail. It is a vital, living anchor designed to be brought directly into the fragmented landscape of your modern daily existence. We encounter our modern rotted signposts not on mountain ridges, but in the small, anxious moments that unfold in the palm of our hands. We feel it when we are lying awake at night, staring at the artificial glow of a device, checking for a text message or a piece of confirmation that never arrives, treating an empty inbox as a terrifying verdict on our future. We feel it when our thoughts keep walking through the conversations of the day, replaying a minor misstep, or when we look at the choices of our peers and find ourselves trapped in a painful comparison, feeling deeply that we are running behind in life, or that our current efforts are simply not enough to ensure our long-term safety. We spend so much of our waking routine pretending to be perfectly fine, wearing a polite smile while carrying a heavy, spinning dizziness right behind our eyes. We try to manipulate the feelings of those around us, attempting to control the direction of a relationship or a career path through constant, exhausting hypervigilance. We look at the unmapped territory of next year and treat it like an impending storm, checking for constant reassurance. Yet when our bodies finally collapse from the sheer weight of this mental architecture, we find ourselves unable to relax because an invisible inner critic insists that rest is an indulgence we have not yet earned. But true peace is never achieved by finally discovering a flawless map that eliminates all human risk. Peace is practiced in the tiny, ordinary gaps of a chaotic afternoon. A single, deliberate breath taken before you open an application or answer a demanding question is a profound form of real wisdom. It is the moment you step off the frantic treadmill of anticipation and realize that not every analytical thought deserves your immediate obedience, and not every rapid feeling is an absolute command to pull your life apart. You can care deeply about your future and your loved ones without gripping the steering wheel so tightly that your knuckles turn white and your chest turns to stone. You can live with an unmade decision without letting its presence ruin the simple reality of the room you are currently inhabiting. Just as the old weaver's staff touched its single inch of soil without needing to conquer the entire mountain, you are fully permitted to drop the invisible maps of tomorrow right now, simply because your frame is tired, and because your body is allowed to rest without needing to prove its worth to the world. When you bring this practical grounding into your modern triggers, the nature of your waiting changes form. The unreturned notification or the uncertain career pivot is no longer a sign that you have permanently ruined your potential. It is simply a moment where the mist has rolled in, leaving the trail unformed for a little while until the morning sun returns. By refusing to spin 5 different hypothetical disasters out of that silence, you allow the present moment to remain exactly what it is, a neutral, quiet gap that does not require you to write a tragic conclusion for it tonight. You stop treating the blank space of your future as a dangerous emergency, and you let it become a spacious sanctuary where your active intellect can finally drop its heavy tools. As you lie here in the deep protective shadow of the late evening, let this poetic loosening move through the specific modern worries that were keeping your pulse fast an hour ago. The work can remain unfinished in its folders. The digital screens can remain dark, and the branches of tomorrow can be left to resolve themselves in their own time. You do not have to achieve absolute certainty before your eyelids are allowed to grow heavy. The entire physical world is letting go of its effort, turning away from the noise of the sun, and you are entirely safe to follow its rhythm. Let your jaw drop open slightly, letting the small muscles around your forehead smooth out completely, and allow your frame to settle into the supportive depth of the mattress, trusting that the unmoving spine of your own awareness already knows exactly how to hold you, without you needing to figure out where the path will turn. The active world has fallen completely away now, leaving only the vast, cool dark of the late night to fill the quiet spaces of your room. The internal maps have all been folded, The wooden spindle in the stone hut has stopped its clicking rhythm, and the endless branches of tomorrow are no longer being tracked by your tired eyes. Let the speed of your internal monologue slow down to a whisper, matching the slow, heavy settling of the mountain ridge as the damp fog thins and clears beneath a silent sky. Your body is becoming profoundly heavy, sinking down into the mattress like that ancient granite boundary marker buried deep within the earth, unmoving and entirely untouched by the wind. With every unhurried breath you let go, your head feels increasingly spacious, increasingly empty, completely untangled from the frantic geometry of calculation. You have full permission to stop solving your whole life tonight. The unmade decisions, the career pathways, and the hypothetical failures you have been replaying do not need to be sorted, mapped, or conquered before you are allowed to sleep. Let the phantoms dissolve, letting the multiple versions of next year lose their terrifying sharpness as the cool air of your room enters and leaves your frame. You are no longer required to build a flawless blueprint across the unknown wilderness of the future, and you do not need to guarantee your safety before your eyes can close. The paths you have been overthinking were never a tightrope over a canyon. They are simply neutral steps upon a supportive earth. And tonight your feet can rest completely, leaving your mind entirely unburdened by tomorrow. Listen to the absolute stillness that remains when the urge to control the future finally goes to sleep. The room around you is perfectly secure, and your breathing has become so quiet, so deep, that it barely ripples the stillness of the dark air across your sheets. The teaching is settling into the very core of your chest now, not as a complex lesson to memorize, but as a physical feeling of returning home to a baseline of peace that never needed an arrow or a signpost to find its way. You are the wide, dark mountain ridge at midnight, where the fog has vanished, leaving only the solid, unmoving presence of the stone resting beneath an immense, starless sky. There are no separate paths here, no separate futures to calculate, and no walls to maintain against the uncertainty of the world. Let yourself sink completely into the dark support of this deep sleep, giving up the final stubborn pieces of the maps you have carried all day. The night is vast enough to hold everything you could not decide, and the mountain does not require the traveler to see the bottom of the peak before agreeing to support their weight. Every muscle along your brow, your jaw, and your shoulders has gone completely slack, soft and open like a plain walking staff that has finally been laid down on the earthen floor. The dilemmas you spent all day trying to solve have lost their urgency, dissolving into nameless, quiet shadows that float harmlessly through the background of your consciousness. You are returning to the silent clarity that existed long before your mind learned how to worry, a sanctuary of pure, untroubled awareness that has never left your side. Let yourself dissolve entirely into this dreamless, velvety expanse, trusting the bed to hold you, trusting the ground to sustain you, and allowing your weary eyes to close completely on the paths of tomorrow as you slide effortlessly into a deep, unbroken rest. What if the solid ground you have been searching for through all these frantic calculations was never hidden at the end of the perfect path, but was already holding your feet right in the middle of the mist? 3. YouTube title options. Final title: When decision anxiety paralyzes your mind. Buddha's mountain story brings deep sleep. The mist that wrapped around the high cliffs does not demand that you master its paths before it allows you to rest it. Simply covers the mountain in a blanket of quiet, unformed space. When we sit with that truth in the deep of the night, the desperate urge to figure out next year begins to feel like trying to grasp a hand full of air. Ancient wisdom reminds us that our primary error is not in making choices, but in believing that a choice has the power to permanently lock us out of our own internal wholeness. We treat our decisions like massive iron gates that shut behind us forever, forgetting that the awareness within us remains completely wide, completely open, and completely free. Regardless of which valley we choose to walk through tomorrow, the step you take is never a final destination. It is simply a continuous, shifting dance with reality, where every single movement carries its own light and its own medicine. We often spend our days running from the discomfort of an open ending, rushing to fill the blank spaces of our lives with immediate answers, forced commitments, or artificial certainties. We want to know the exact shape of the horizon before we agree to plant our feet. But the natural world shows us that the most beautiful landscapes are those that remain fluid, where the forest does not apologize for its shadows, and the ridge does not panic when the clouds erase the stars. True spiritual alignment is not about engineering a life that is entirely free of fog. It is about learning to walk through the fog with a soft heart, trusting that the single inch of ground directly beneath your weight is all you ever need to encounter. When you stop demanding that your future prove its safety to you tonight, the heavy armor around your chest drops away, leaving nothing but a spacious, quiet sanctuary where your breath can move without restriction. Let your consciousness dissolve a little deeper into this unanchored space, where the distinction between your body and the stillness of the room begins to melt away. You can feel the cool night air entering and leaving your lungs not as a task you are performing, but as a gentle, natural wave that the night itself is breathing through your frame. There is absolutely no danger in letting go of the steering wheel right now. The choices that kept your mind spinning all afternoon, the financial calculations, the relationship crossroads, and the fear of missing out have all lost their gravity, drifting away like pale green lichen fragments carried off by a midnight breeze. They no longer possess the power to pull you back into the old loops of anxiety, because you have stopped treating them as emergencies. You have allowed them to rest upon the stone. As you sink further into the heavy, comforting warmth of your bed, feel a sense of profound, quiet reconciliation washing over your entire being. From the crown of your head down to the tips of your toes, the muscles along your brow and jaw are completely soft now, loose and receptive, like wet earth that has been smoothed over by the mountain mist. Your mind is completely empty of the maps you thought you had to draw to survive the day. You are returning to your true ground, to the ancient, unmoving spine of awareness that was always here, waiting beneath the frantic noise of your thoughts, entirely whole, entirely safe, and entirely untroubled by the unformed roads of tomorrow. Let the final remnants of your calculation float free, dissolving like single drops of dew into the immense, dark stillness of the ridge. There is no longer any trail to choose, no longer any future to defend, and no longer any need to remain awake. You are safely home, enveloped in the vast, unbroken cradle of a dreamless rest. The immense, dark stillness of the ridge holds your entire being in a state of absolute protection, where the need to know has completely transformed into the freedom to rest. When we look at the nature of our anxiety, we see that it is always looking forward, always trying to build a shelter out of tomorrow's thoughts. But Buddhist wisdom gently points out that the only place where your life is actually real is right here, within the boundary of this single unhurried breath. The future you are trying so hard to organize is not a solid wall you are about to crash into. It is an unformed, spacious sky that naturally opens up to meet you exactly as you are. By surrendering the urge to guess what is coming, you are not abandoning your life. You are simply allowing your energy to collect back into your own center, returning to the rich, fertile ground of the immediate present. The old weaver's uncarved staff and the hermit's lichen-covered stone are simple reminders that true strength never comes from having a perfect map, but from having a steady mind that can stand comfortably inside the unknown. When you let go of the idea that one specific choice will save you and another will ruin you, the terrible division in your thoughts disappears. You see that your life is a single, continuous stream of experience, and every path you walk will bring its own unique beauty, its own necessary lessons, and its own opportunities to wake up. The universe does not judge you for your hesitation, and it does not require you to be perfectly decided before it agrees to provide you with air, with warmth, and with a safe place to rest your head. You can step off the wheel of calculation right now, simply because the sun has gone down and the earth itself is inviting you to sleep. Let your awareness drift even further into this dark, velvety expanse, allowing the final words and concepts of the day to lose their structure. Your breathing has become a soft, rhythmic whisper that blends perfectly with the silence of the room. The bed beneath you takes every remaining ounce of your physical weight, supporting your spine, your hips, and your shoulders with an absolute, unmoving certainty. There is no longer any need to perform, to plan, or to keep watch over your destiny in the dark. The maps have been laid down. The fire has burned down to a gentle, silent warmth, and your mind is floating out into a dreamless expanse where there are no roads left to map and no choices left to fear. You are completely safe, completely whole, and completely free to let go of the day, sliding effortlessly into the deep, quiet sanctuary of an unbroken sleep. The unbroken sleep opens wide around you, an infinite ocean of shadow where all directions dissolve into a single peaceful presence. In this deep layer of quiet, the final secret of the unmoving stone reveals itself to your tired mind. The path you are so afraid of missing is not something outside of you that you must chase down or capture. Your life is the path itself, unfolding naturally with every beat of your heart, with every shift of your weight, and with every slow, dark breath you release into the room. We often carry a profound, hidden guilt at night, believing that if we are confused, we are somehow wasting our time, or that our hesitation has permanently stalled our spiritual evolution. But ancient insight reminds us that the confusion is simply the mind trying to weave a net out of smoke. The awareness that witnesses the confusion is already completely clear, already completely awake, and already resting safely at home. When you look closely at the texture of your own consciousness in this relaxed state, you can see that it has no shape, no boundaries, and no preference for tomorrow over yesterday. It is like the vast mountain sky that holds both the thick autumn fog and the brilliant morning sun, with the exact same unconditional space. It does not panic when the trail is hidden, and it does not celebrate when the view is clear. It simply allows everything to arise, change, and pass away in its own time. The unmade choices that kept your chest tight during the day are merely tiny clouds passing through this infinite expanse. They do not stain the sky, they do not damage your inherent value, and they do not require you to sit awake in the dark trying to force them to move. You can let them hang there in the mist, unformed and unresolved, trusting that the very space that holds them also knows exactly how to give you rest. Let yourself glide even further down into this dark, supportive current, where the rhythm of your frame matches the absolute stillness of the deep earth beneath the foundations of your house. Your breath has become so soft, so quiet, that it is like a single leaf falling silently through the mountain air onto a bed of damp moss. The physical weight of your body has surrendered completely to the surface beneath you, letting your spine stretch out and your shoulders drop their final invisible shields. There is no longer any separate self left to protect from the uncertainty of next year, no longer any analytical trial to conduct behind your eyelids, and no longer any need to justify your existence through constant restless planning. The fire has cooled completely to a gentle, silent ash. The wind has died down across the upper crags, and the trails have all vanished into the perfect, starless dark. You are fully permitted to let your mind go completely blank tonight, giving up the very last threads of the maps you have polished so carefully since the morning. The darkness is taking everything you left unfinished, holding it safely in a vast, non-judgmental sanctuary where there is nothing left to decide, nothing left to prove, and nothing left to fear. Every muscle along your jaw, your forehead, and your hands has gone completely slack, soft and open like a plain piece of wood resting on the floor of the stone hut. You are returning to the deep primordial clarity that existed long before you ever learned how to worry about the future, a sacred space of pure, untroubled presence that has never left your side for a single second. Let yourself dissolve entirely into this beautiful, velvety expanse, trusting the night to cradle you, trusting the ground to sustain you, and allowing your weary soul to sink effortlessly into a deep, unbroken, and dreamless sleep. The dreamless sleep opens its arms wide, accepting the fullness of your being without asking you to change a single detail of your current reality. In this deep layer of physical surrender, the mind finally stops its quiet argument with time, realizing that the great peace you have been searching for through your calculations was never an objective to be conquered at the end of a long trail. It is the very field of awareness that is currently holding your body, breathing your lungs, and witnessing the silent space of your room. We often live with a subtle, heavy anxiety that whispers that if we do not constantly supervise our destiny, our life will somehow fall apart into total chaos. We treat our minds like a frantic sentinel standing guard over an unformed future, forgetting that the universe has been carrying the weight of the stars, the oceans, and the mountain ridges for millions of years without a single bit of our assistance. This is the ultimate, gentle release that Buddhist wisdom offers to your tired spirit tonight. The profound realization that you do not need to understand the whole map in order to be completely safe on the earth. The uncertainty of tomorrow is not a dangerous void that you must desperately fill with your worries. It is a creative, open sky that allows every moment to be entirely fresh, entirely new, and entirely unburdened by the mistakes of the past. When you let go of the demand that life present you with an absolute guarantee of success, the invisible knots along your throat and chest untie themselves naturally, leaving nothing but a wide, hollow sanctuary where the night air can move without restriction. You see that your path is not a narrow high wire, where a single misstep drops you into ruin, but a vast, supportive meadow where every direction you choose leads to another beautiful part of the same sacred ground. Let your mind float down even further into this unanchored stillness, allowing the final mental images of the crossroads, the stone hut, and the old weaver to dissolve like soft mist under a midnight sky. Your breathing has slowed down to a quiet, natural rhythm that carries no internal destination and requires no effort from your frame. The mattress beneath you feels incredibly deep and solid, absorbing the heavy structural weight of your shoulders, your spine, and your hips, letting every muscle sink into the bedding with a profound sense of total physical safety. There is no longer any need to plan, to compare, or to keep a vigilant watch over your life in the dark. The maps have all been left on the floor. The fire has cooled to a silent, gentle warmth, and your awareness is expanding into a beautiful, velvety space where there are no roads left to calculate and no choices left to fear. You are fully permitted to let your thoughts go completely quiet tonight, giving up the very last threads of the arguments you have been holding behind your eyes since the morning began. The deep night is taking everything you left unfinished, cradling it safely in a vast, non-judgmental embrace where there is nothing left to decide, nothing left to prove, and nothing left to protect. Every tiny fiber along your jaw, your forehead, and your hands has gone completely slack, soft and open like a leaf that has finally found its resting place on the mossy ground of the mountain pass. You are returning to the silent, primordial home that existed long before your intellect learned how to worry about tomorrow. A sanctuary of pure, untroubled presence that has never left your side. Let yourself sink entirely into this beautiful, dreamless dark, trusting the night to hold you, trusting the ground to sustain you, and allowing your weary soul to slide effortlessly into a deep, peaceful, and unbroken rest.